All right, so the first thing behind the scenes reveal is we do thumbnail faces.
How did I feel about this book facially? Sun God. Crow God.
Oh, that's good.
Get ready for my greatest Serapio.
Oh, that's true too.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Flappy, Crow God.
Oh, yeah, the fluffy.
That's actually really good. That's a good one. I gotta use one of those.
You're welcome.
So today we're going to be talking about a book called Black Sun, and we are live streaming this today on the wonderful not Sunday of this weekend.
Yes, and we have with us one viewer so far. Jessie lost her pen. She's here backing us up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, Jessie. Holy shit, my bad. I'm so sorry.
What a dick!
She's gonna cancel her subscription now. This is our second live stream for Patreon. If you would like to become part of these streams in the future and ask us questions, you can join us on our Patreon. We think it's a pretty cool perk. We'll have some of our friends in chat besides just Jessie, but if it's just Jessie, she gets to pick our brains for all the questions she had for the book. Later on, we also had some people ask questions early on the Patreon page that we'll go through and answer those, I think, as they become more relevant to what we're talking about in the book. But the book we're talking about, like Katie said, is Black Sun, and it's by an author called Rebecca Roanhorse. And it's kind of an interesting book because it is set in an extremely pre-Columbian, like high fantasy type setting.
For Latin America.
Don't ask me why, but for some reason pre-Columbian means South America and Native American means North American Indian. Like there are very specific terms that refer to each, and it doesn't really make sense why. Maria, what did you think of this book?
So I really enjoyed this book, but I have quite a few issues with this book, and like there were things I really liked, and like I loved the setting, I liked the characters a lot, but there were ways in which, number one, I thought the ending fumbled it.
Oh my god, yeah, that's my worst criticism about it. The ending, literally, it does feel like a fumbled football.
There's a couple of characters that I think were not, specifically one, and I'll make this argument as we go through. The character that I think was like the most mishandled was Okoa. Oh my god. I loved Okoa, and he was just...
What was the point of having his perspective?
I will argue what should have happened with him, because I love my baby crow boy.
We will spill that tea because there is cacao tea to be spilled. Cacao doesn't make tea, it makes chocolate. But
spicy cacao drink of the gods. But so yeah, that's like, I had a lot of things I liked, and I enjoyed the reading experience. There were a few things, and I've talked about it before, that smacked me out of the narrative. One thing I will say is this author has a habit of dropping threads. Like things start and then boom, you don't, and it's book one in a series, and so not all the threads need to be cleaned up here, but like only one thread was followed to anything that resembled a conclusion.
And I will argue that even that was not done justice, that it still feels like there's 3 chapters left to this book that didn't get there.
That's my biggest complaint. It feels like we needed 4 more chapters. Ooh, yes, no, I completely agree. Okoa should have had more chapters. Jessie just said this in the chat.
Well, I'll argue it's in a weird limbo where either he shouldn't have had any chapters, or he should have,
or she needed more.
No, Okoa was a pretty important character, honestly. That provided a really unique perspective that really seemed to, I mean, it felt like it was going to carry some weight, but then it got cut short with what's-her-face?
Narampa?
It got cut short with her, and then it got cut short with his sister, and then his sister got cut super short, and then he just sort of like was there, like a life raft in the he was Wilson in the ocean.
Halfway through the book, I thought he shouldn't have been a point of view character, and I was on team we needed less. And then by the time I finished the book, I was like, nah. We needed more. And I have exactly what his plot and arc should have been already in my little noggin, and half of it was already set up. Actually, both of it was set up in the actual book, and just, it didn't go anywhere. So that's my complaint. My boy Okoa was done dirty, and the book felt like it ended 50 pages early.
Crow ex machina is a great term, Jessie. And grab the dais. That is a very good point.
That is the best summary of this book.
Oh, that's what we should name it. Crow Ex Machina.
There you go,
That's
Jesse.
the title.
You just
There
named
we
our
go.
next title.
I'll credit you in the description.
But I thought it was really, really well written at the beginning. It was actually, I think the thing that stood out the most for me was the romance. Sorry,
That's fine.
The romance really stood out for me. It seemed really, really good at first, but then it got ruined, and we'll discuss it later for me. I thought the characters were crazy interesting. That was one of the strongest suits. We've got, I guess, what could have been a more like down-to-earth, more like warrior type-esque thing with Okoa. And so that would have been really nice for those all to come together in some way. It really seemed like she got forced to cut it short.
That's exactly what I said. And it's weird because like she could have made so much more time if she just cut like 6 viewpoints. This book has a very step-on problem, I think is how I described it to Maria, of extra viewpoints. I will say that overall, I thought the book was good. I didn't particularly think it was great. Like, I enjoyed reading Serapio and Giala's storyline. Like, I enjoyed that. I was reading afterwards, I did a little bit of research today on the author because there was some like controversy stuff. And one of the things she said is that she had started with Ciala as a character, and then the rest of the story kind of grew from there.
Oh, that's funny.
That is not where I would have thought this story started.
You can feel it because that's the character she's clearly the most interested in, and I feel like she would have been better served writing Mayan pirate shenanigans than doing this big political plot line. You know, I think there's a lot of things she does pretty good. I don't think she does anything great, and I think that ending is fumbled bad.
I wanted to point out that was the thing that I had trouble with the romance and how it progressed past the death of the crew. Ciala, is that how you say her name?
In the audiobook, they say Ciala.
She becomes like, everyone calm down. Gird your loins. She seemed like a Mary Sue. Like towards the middle. I don't know, she lost all of her character for me.
I felt like she started as a Mary Sue and then became more likable as the author kind of took a little bit of the piss out of her. Because that beginning starts exactly like the Cyborg Tinkerer, and I'm like,
oh my god, it killed me. I checked out hardcore for a minute. I was like, I hate this book just because it was like the same beginning.
I have to agree, I wasn't sure what I felt about Ciala when I started, but I very quickly, like, she wasn't a Mary Sue to me. My problem is the opposite of Katie's. After the crew died, I felt like Ciala stopped having much of a point.
That's what I mean.
Well, what you said was she became a Mary Sue, and the Mary Sues generally always have a point and are powerful, and it felt like she got defanged.
Why is she there? What does she do to affect the plot of the book after that point?
Now, did I love the bath scene? Abso-fucking-lutely.
But that's what I mean by Mary Sue. She starts off with like a vague sense of
you're writing Final Fantasy VII fan fiction, and then you have the hot girl following Sephiroth around. That's kind of what it felt like at a certain point. That it's that kind of Mary Sue where it's just like, I'm just along for the ride and hot, and like I have intense emotional discussions with the bad guy, but it's not.
Thank you. Yes,
Girl,
that is exactly what I meant.
I know
by Mary
the
Sue.
fanfic in both our hearts.
Ciala's purpose became too closely tied to Serapio. Exactly. Like, she became his companion instead of her own flippant character. Thank you, Jesse. Alright, guys. So, this book starts with what I think is a very gripping and intense, like, opening sequence, which is this young boy named Serapio in the middle of a, like, what you think is like a coming of age ritual. Like, his mom is like prepping stuff for him, and he had to drink this like ugly liquid, and she's like, make sure you drink all of it, otherwise it'll hurt. And you're like, what's gonna hurt? And then you realize that like she's carved crow wings into his back and onto his chest, and apparently this should have been done a couple of years ago, but no, she did it this morning. And he originally, when he drank the white creamy poison, he didn't finish all of it, and he threw it up, so the cutting hurt. And then he had to do it again. And she made him, so there's an eclipse happening. He's kind of like an Abregi prince, which is this one region and this one group of people, and his mother is a foreigner. She's a Carrion Crow woman, and she's really imposing and beautiful, and you can tell child Serapio really loves his mama. She's like, today Like, we must get through all of these things. And you're like, what's going to happen? And like I said, step 1 was carving into his skin. Step 2, drinking milky poison. Step 3, holding his eyelids open as he stares into a flippin' eclipse to blind him.
That's great.
And then she ties him down to a table. So you as a reader are like, and I want you to picture this, if you will. Maria just got off a ferry and had to by herself ask a Greek taxi man to take her to the airport. Finally gets to said airport, is all by herself, having left her friends that she came to visit in the airport. And I'm just listening to the scene, horrified, making faces like, and just like, there was a lady in the airport sitting like not far from me, and at one point I looked over and she was staring at me like, what the fuck is happening?
These weird Americans.
Mama Carrion Crow ties little baby Serapio to a table and sews his eyelids shut.
A+ mother material, personally. I think that's the way all mothers should treat their children.
It takes Tiger Mom to a new level.
And she says to him, like, the next time you open your eyes, you will do so as a god. And she said, like, he told me I must have a, like, foreign son in a foreign land and do it, and I have done it. And now my work is done. And Serapio's still side to a table, and she's like, goodbye, my son. And he was like, what the fuck you mean goodbye, mama?
I know. You know what? When I was reading this, I genuinely wrote on my notes back when I was writing notes for this book, I wrote, so she pieced out after fucking up her son, ? And I can just imagine her almost like as my own mother on the balcony with her cigarette breath being like, and then jumping off and then dying.
Yeah, that was my reaction too, Jesse. It was kind of just like, and it kept getting like more and more out there, and I really liked it, to be honest. I was like, oh, this is hardcore. And then when you realize she's gonna jump and just leave him there.
The background music to this moment, as his eyelids were finishing getting sewed, is his father banging on the door. Like, Seiya, don't do this! Don't do this! He's your son! And like banging, and then you hear, break down the door! And he's like, Mama! Mama, where did you go? And then he hears footsteps, and then, phew, and she jumps off the flippin' balcony down the mountain.
You know what I always like was really frustrated with? The very first thing I thought when I heard, I was listening to the audiobook, so I did hear it. But when we got to the part where his father was banging on the door saying, don't do this, I thought, oh, we have a loving father.
I think as a father, it's hard to know your son is a crow god.
One of the things I'll talk about is that I kind of wish there was a little bit more done with Serapio's inner life, in that he doesn't quite feel as just like raw emotional scar tissue that he would be everywhere on the inside in terms of his narration. He's not quite radically scarred enough, I'll argue. So like his relationship with his father feels like the author didn't want to have to add another layer of stuff on top of the emotionality she was already writing. So she was just like, and then he just didn't really pay attention that much.
I mean, it's fine. It's because if his father's not really that important, whatever. And also, you get little bits and pieces of him throughout the novel, of him being in the background, unconcerned with having himself in. Well, actually, that's not true. You can feel the tension that the dad has for his son in what's echoed that, Serapio hears between like servants or whatever, or other people, plus his dad actually like derisively discussing stuff almost like he's in third person when he's around. So it really comes through. I thought she did fine with that, actually.
So I get what Will's saying. I did think Serapio felt less like a human who was going to become the vessel of a god, or who was a vessel of a god that would eventually like die for it, and more just like was vessel of God. Like he had been born the vessel of a god instead of traumatically being turned into one. But for me, that was fine.
I will make an argument later about how his viewpoint and how that should have been done better. But it is time to introduce our second main character, Gwendolyn Grimm. Oh, wait, no.
God, now that you said that, I can't get it out of my mind. She sounds like her now, though. Too, in my brain. Thank you.
It's similar, but a better character.
Anyway, so you have that scene and you're like, holy shit, how is this going to continue? It continues with the woman waking up after being drunk in a jail cell. That's how that's the next scene you get to, and it is our main character Shala. She's a ship captain, and she's a teak, and it's not explained initially, but there are different groups of people from all over, but teaks are weird ones. They're like considered half fish people. You learn through Shala more about like her experience, and basically they have a very, very strong connection to the ocean and the sea. They consider the sea their mother.
They're like sirens of the deep.
Siren Amazons.
They're siren Amazons. She wakes up and she's like, how did I get here? I remember getting into a fight with that one noble lord because he was trying to jip me, and I threw him into the water, but I didn't think I killed him. And basically she remembers
she has a brain tumor that she's going to die from, and she's no longer interested
she
in
is
sex.
very bi, though, as well, so that's another...
And she is interested in sex. When she'd come into port the previous night, she went to a bar, got a little drunk, saw a pretty lady. Her and the pretty lady made eyes at each other, went back to pretty lady's house, and started doing the nasty. And then pretty lady's husband came in, and that's adultery. And in this part of the world, they say no to same-sex relationships. So it was a super bad. And she was like, oh, great, this isn't even just like get out of jail and pay a fine. They're going to kill me for it. And I was like, man, that's harsh. But out of nowhere comes a very nicely dressed man.
Noble man who's coming to rescue her with his money.
No cane,
to
though.
offer her a job on a ship.
Lord Bilam, who's described as a cat. He's like very finely, but not like ornately dressed, but like you can tell he got money. And he bribes the guards into letting her out. And he was like, I have a job for you. I need you. So number one, you need to do this one job for me. But if you do that, I will hire you for like 12 years, 15, however many. This was the point where I was like, that's a little cyborg tinkerish. I will hire you. And after that period of time, you will get 10% of all of the money I've made during that time, and I will provide you food and lodgings while you're in port, and you'll be taken care of while you're on the sea. And she was like, man, this is a pretty sweet deal. And he's like, all you have to do is take one man to Tova, and Tova is the city. It's kind of like the religious center of this world.
I was picturing essentially what's it called? Game of Thrones, Southern.
King's Landing?
It's like the King's Landing. And I imagined Narapa's whole political sphere, which we haven't gotten into yet, as King's Landing. Now I want to watch Game of Thrones.
Take a shot.
No. That is only for the books. We do not do that for the show.
Tova is the city that the Carrion Crow people are from. It's the place that his mother told Serapio he would have to go. And so at this point, Lord Bilam is hiring Shala to take Serapio to Tova to fulfill his destiny. But they have to do it before the next eclipse, which they call the Convergence, which is in like 20 days. And it takes longer than that to get there normally. But he was like, I know you can do it. You can sing to the sea. You is Teak. And she's like, I am Teak. Jesse took the shot. Don't worry. Will's going to bring up Game of Thrones as well. So get ready for 2 shots, everyone. Get your second shot ready.
Moment of silence for my liver.
I'm surprised it survived after Cyborg Tinkerer.
So Shala's like, yeah, I'll do it. This seems great. She meets her crew. Her crew is partially the crew that she just worked with on the other boat. They're kind of about having a Teak captain. But her previous, one of the guys that was on her previous ship is now her first mate. They kind of create like a tacit peace between them.
I thought that was going to go in a different direction, which is why I'm sad that the crew died. There were so many ups and downs in the trust that they build in this relationship. And Maria will get to the parts where, in the plot points. But there were a lot of good points that I thought were built. And it felt like a popped balloon of an opportunity to have I know it's one piecey, friendship, love overcomes everything. But I like that. In this case, I like happy sailor pirate people. So.
It was set up as something that Shala was actively trying to do, create a good relationship with these people, overcome the stereotypes and misgivings people have about the Teak.
More than anything, it felt like the beginning of an arc of like, this is going to mean something and go somewhere and be representative of growth. And it may or may not, but not, spoiler alert, go anywhere.
Basically, they go off on the thing. She gets on her ship. some guy tries to stop her from leaving from her previous voyage, and Lord Balaam is like, nah, I got this, go. And she's like, Roger Dodger, I'm outie. So she leaves, and then we cut back, I don't know, to, at the end of her, she has this vision where there's like, she's just doing her thing on the ship, and then she's like, why the fuck is there a raven or a crow on the ship? That's weird. And she's looking at the crow, and then all of a sudden she sees a man's face, and he is handsome but kind of weird looking because he's got blindfold on, and he looks real intense, and then it disappears, and she's like, man, I don't normally have visions. Is that not one of my powers? So yeah, we cut to Serapio, who's like, hot damn, that teak lady not only broke my...
Instantly. Instant hard on.
Not only did she like see my crow, but she severed my connection and threw me out of my vision, and he's literally bleeding, and he's like, yeah, that's kind of weird. And basically, Balaam put him on this ship. He's been by himself for a while. He's kind of lonely. He's had a rough childhood. He's ready to get on with the rest of his life.
After the ship, we have the two, set up the two of them, Ciala and Sarapa, on the ship. And then we go over to where they're going to be going to Torvo and that area.
Tova.
Which used to worship the carrion crow god.
Multiple gods. The 4 Sky Maiden clans had their own gods. Each of those gods, through one thing or another, died, and now worship of the sun god is the only worship in Tova. So that's one of the issues. The carrion crow people want to worship their crow god, and those people are considered cultists.
And they got massacred like 18 years before.
Yeah, so basically, everybody worships sun god now. A couple years, like 20, I think it was like 100, because it was his mother's grandmother. Carrion Crow was like, we want our crow god. We shall do a little mini worship. Sun priest people were like, we don't like that. Not our god, not our time. We think you might rebel. So they just picked a night and slaughtered a bunch of the Carrion Crow people, and it's called the Night of Knives, and it's really fucked up the Carrion Crow people. They got a lot of baggage. They started doing that thing where they carve each other's chests and backs with the
crow scars.
They do that as remembrance of the Night of Knives. And the way that Tova is set up is that there's a bunch of like islands that are like cities kind of on mountains, it sounds like, and then they're all connected through rope bridges. So this is like a precarious place, and it's like up, and then below all of that is the ground people. What are they called?
Isn't that so cool? The earth people.
Basically, there's the Sky Clans, which are those the 4 Winged Serpent, Water Strider, Golden Eagle, and the Carrion Crow. So those are the Sky Maid clans, and they into air because they're in those like high places. And then on anything that was on the ground, which is also Coyote's Maw, which is where our next main character, Narampa, is born. And you find out she came from like a super poor family, and she was like, I want to go study and be a servant in the priesty place so I can learn things.
Also, can I just mention that the Maw, as a gambling, whoring district, is A+ creative writing title. The Maw.
It's Coyote's Maw, which is a little less cool, but yeah.
No, that's still cool. It's because a coyote,
Coyotes are just not cool animals. They're just...
Yes, they are.
Coyotes will never be cool animals, I'm sorry. Out of the dog animals, it's wolves, dogs, hyenas. Actually, foxes are above hyenas. Hyenas, coyotes.
Where are you getting this
Coyotes
data
are
from?
not cool animals. They eat people's dogs in California. That's like they're just shittier, smaller wolves.
Children.
It's true.
We
The
really
point
need to fucking talk about your
that I was
feelings.
trying to make was that Narampa came from very rough beginnings, but y'all went on a fucking coyote tangent. You're children. And Narampa grows up, and her mother's like, maybe I can get you a job with the lady I work with. She works for the Sky Maids, and maybe you could be a servant. And then she was like, that would be nice. And then I could learn things. And then her brothers talk about how, like, nah, if I was going to be in the Sky Maids, I'd want to be like ride the flying beasts and be cool and powerful. And she's like, nah, I just want to learn. The stars are pretty cool. And then you find out that not only did she become a maid in the Sky Maid places, she eventually got to be an actual dedicant, and then got really close with the sun priest, and then he named her his successor, and then she became, and that's where you start the book with her. So you get a flashback to her childhood, and then you're like, boom, she's the sun priest.
She's Littlefinger. She's
no, look, you just want to get drunk. Okay, no, I'm nixing these references.
Yes,
that does not fit.
Terrible.
No. You will not use A Song of Ice and Fire to abet your alcoholism. But yeah, so she is now in charge, and she wants the priesthood to be more active in people's lives because it's losing its ability. I don't know, whatever has been happening with the Catholic Church for the last 300 years. It's the same problem.
She feels like they've become too much of just people up in the mountain in the kind of like, I imagine them like academics. There's academics in their ivory towers doing their things completely separated and uninvolved with the actual goings on with people on the ground. And so the people on the ground are kind of like, fuck you, academics. And the same thing is kind of happening. And the Sun Priest has kind of become a figurehead role with not a lot of power, because her previous guy because previously the Sun Priest was like, we're going to attack Carrion Crow and Knight of Knives. And then everybody after that was like, man, that wasn't a good decision. Maybe we shouldn't be able to make those kinds of decisions. So the Sun Priest was slowly stripped of power, and it was kind of dispersed. And she's like, no, I don't. I'd like to change that. I'd like to become a bigger part of people's lives. I'd like people to be involved. I have a strange relationship with Narampa. It's a little bit different. I'd been reading after I started the book. I read on our Discord, we have a spoilers chat.
Which, by the way, you should join our Discord to gain access to.
Jesse and Shelby were talking about the book and talking about Narampa and the politicking happening with her and not fully understanding what they felt about her. My problem with Narampa is I liked her as a character, but she makes dumb decisions.
How old is she?
33.
Okay, because I was picturing her as a matronly character because of her competitor that she has on Day.
Ava.
Ada. I liked her.
I liked her too.
I hated her. What an annoying bitch.
I thought she was an annoying hot bitch too.
Ava's fucking 19. I do not buy that she was that smart.
All right, here's my feelings. One of I don't remember the exact thing, and I can't open it right now because everybody's seeing my screen. But on our Patreon, one of the questions they wanted us to talk about was what I thought about the politics of the book. And in general, I felt like the politics were okay, but they're not Jacqueline Carey level, and they're not very intricate, and they're actually a little hard to understand what's going on. Because it just feels very indistinct. Okay, why did the Sun Church feel this strongly about murdering Carrion Crow? What was actually motivating it beyond? What actually motivated them to do this slaughter? As much as I didn't like it, Children of Blood and Bone, that had a reasonable reason for the night of whatever, I forget what they call it there. Whatever their scouring night was called, that was a little bit more believable. Here, their motivations were never really gotten into of why they did this really violent thing. It felt very unclear exactly what Narampa was trying to do and why she was having trouble doing it, and in general, what the other players involved wanted to do and why they wanted to do it. It all just felt very sort of vague to me. And I think that's the problem with Narampa as a character, is it's hard to have a stance on her because it's hard to know exactly what she wants or what's going on.
You never get a clear idea of what her idea of a successful community would look like.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that fact. I just always noticed her over-idealism, which comes across very apparently.
Honestly, the major machination was just, Narampa is not from the Skymaid clans, and she's Sun Priest, and other people don't like it, and she's trying to do reforms, and they don't like it, so they don't want her to be Sun Priest, so they're going to machinize against her.
It's whatever. It's weak sauce, but it's fine.
It's fine, but it's a little simplistic. Ava doesn't get to become Sun Priest. It's not like her rank changes at all. I could not understand what her motivations were.
Isn't she a lackey for someone else?
So she is from Golden Eagle. She's Golden Eagle, and Golden Eagle are traditionalists they're not here to rock the boat. They like that the Sun Priest has kind of been pulled.
They're not the cool emo crows. They're those jock golden eagles. Like, that's really the feeling I had about some of this.
I know.
Oh, golden eagle. It's gold, which is supposed to be a good color, and eagle, which is usually a good color.
Jock.
So I'm going to subvert it by having them be the not good guys.
And it's not even like they're the not good guys, but they like the current status quo, and they'd like to become stronger and have a stronger influence. So if they have the Sun Priest as a golden eagle, who is Narampa was going to name a successor named Ichi. He was Golden Eagle, and Ichi starts sleeping together. And then suddenly Ichi's like, I'm gonna be combative.
She actually had, and I did kind of like her because hot bitchy, but she actually has a significantly more realistic and concrete goal than Narampa does. And that you're kind of like, oh, okay, her goal is she doesn't want the poor kid being the Sun Priest. The whole thing is very fuzzy, and it's hard to understand why anyone really wants to do anything.
The vibe I got was that that Golden Eagle just wanted more power. They were trying to consolidate power for themselves and get more power. And because Narampa wanted to reform and give more power back to the Sun Priest, it would take power away from what the individual Sky Maid clans had. Golden Eagle didn't want that, so they were using Ava as their machination tool. And again, the thing is though, it's real simplistic. Like, step one for me before trying to kill off the Sun Priest would have been to try win her over.
Part of the problem, and I didn't realize it to this moment, is that the religion in this book for the Sun Priest does not exist, in that Narampa is head priestess. She never has any religious thoughts. It's not like, oh, I have an opinion. We don't know about any of the rites. We don't know about any of the beliefs. We know they do stuff with astrology. And look, pre-Columbian astrology culture is absolutely fascinating. It's a really deep well to draw from. The book doesn't do any of that. Again, Narampa is high priestess. We should know some of the theological arguments and theological thought going on in the temple. And that's why the Knight of Knives does not make sense to me. We are not shown that this is a fundamentalist religion where they're like, no, only the sun god. You do not get that sense from any of the religious people in the book.
I just was going to make the point that the political scheming doesn't always have to necessarily be deep. But then you know what I thought about just now? The Godstone book.
Girl of something in Thorn.
Is that about the Hispanic?
The belly button. That's exactly what it was.
Don't worry, I'll cut that part out too.
I mean, it was great.
You didn't hear what he said. Oh, don't worry. Okay. I did. I know, because he said it to me 100 times. Don't worry about it, Katie. You're fine. It's fine. Hopefully Jesse didn't hear it either. Jesse said and agreed that the connection to religion was very lacking, especially with the priests. And I do agree. They felt like a political organization with ceremonial duties rather than I would have liked, because Carrion Crow, you feel the religious aspect to the crow god. There is a feeling of worship,
belief.
Who is the sun god? And there's something that's going to happen.
They seem dead as well. So when everyone else is like, oh, your Carrion Crow, your crow god.
Even Ziala's relationship with the sea also feels much more, even aside of the fact that she can do sea magic, her belief in it as her mother actually feels kind of deep and nuanced, and there's stories around it, and there's a culture. Whereas the sun god, I was just like, really? That's it? There's nothing to it besides sometimes we chart out stars? In general, the book to me felt much more integrated with its setting than Children of Blood and Bone did, which often got a lot of accolades, but I didn't think accolades, not acolytes. I didn't feel like it was really very well tied to its culture. This one felt more so, but there's still gaps in it. And I think basically, this is all to say, because it's been a while on this, the lack of a real concrete religious organization and schemes means that Narampa's character is always going to end up being a little bit weak, because it's never quite clear what she thinks.
And there's a lot of political machinations it's not even machinations. It's Ava makes a move, and then Narampa's like, damn. I must counter and hold my cool. And she never
does anything.
She has unresolved sexual tension with Iktan, and then we're on to the next chapter where the same thing happens over again.
And the thing is, I like Narampa as a character. I liked the idea of someone trying to reform, seeing it the situation. I liked that she was like the idealist of the group.
Yeah, and as humbled as she was, because later on when she meets her brother, she engages with him in a very humble manner that sort of makes her almost seem matronly, which is a really cool difference between the other characters that are currently in this book.
She never did something that made me think, yes, this is why you're Sun Priest. You know, like, there was never that moment, like, It is for this reason that you are Sun Priest.
It takes you a while to actually also realize what the role of Sun Priest is, because it doesn't feel like she matches it. Like, I did not get that it was as big a deal as it was until later in the book.
Yeah,
just simply because
100%.
She doesn't act like it's a super big deal, and nobody acts like it's a big deal that she is Sun Priest, so it just felt very... But we should get back to Xiala.
They're on the ship, and Xiala's like, I need to make the crew... Because part of her journey is that she has to go out onto open waters. Most of the crew, especially this time of year, does not want to have to go out onto open water. There's a lot of storms that happen this time of year. And they think they are making the journey to Tova by hugging the coast, but that would take 30 days, and they need to do this in 20. So Lord Balam was like, nah, you gotta go into open water. Do it. We didn't tell the crew. You're going to have to tell the crew. Good luck!
But you're Teak, you have water magic, you can get this done. And we figure out that she actually can sing to the sea and get it to calm down a little bit. They're going out on the ocean, she does a song, she calms the sea. Everyone's like, oh shit, that's awesome. And you're like, all right.
Not just that, she specifically has them do a friendship building exercise. Wait, what's this called? A icebreaker. She literally has them do a college style icebreaker by bringing them onto the land, giving them lots of liquor and lots of really good food and oysters. It's mentioned several times. That's how important it is.
Oysters and chocolate, you know? Hey.
And she really rallies them and really starts forming bonds between them. And so, as Will was saying and about to carry on later on, that's completely like a foot in mouth stuffed, no benefit.
Yeah, so there is that setup, that kind of arc between her and the crew. And but the other big arc that's set up during this portion is her and Serapio. They talk a lot. They do the whole like
yeah, constantly.
I loved it. My shipper hardship.
I did too.
I didn't love it. I did like it though, and that was the most enjoyable part of the book. They have a good back and forth because she's like feisty Mayan pirate lady
who's also like very sexually like positive. She's done a lot of stuff.
She's punk, he's goth,
and then there he is. Yeah, but he's like virgin baby boy who's never like touched a woman. It's great.
So they're supposed to be bonding. I will say that there's this whole thing where the book kind of wants you to think that they're bonding, partly because, you know, she is an outsider as a Teak. No one trusts her. At one point, she actually had somebody steal her finger, and by steal, I mean cut it off and sell it. He feels like an outsider because he's a weird dude with pointed red teeth and who's blind and is also a vessel for a god. And so there's a certain amount that they bond on that. I'm going to talk later about how that does not quite work correctly. But the other big thing we realize is that throughout the book, there are flashbacks to his time as a child and 3 tutors that come to teach him, that all knew his mother and had promised his mother that once she was dead, they would come and teach him. And one of them taught him to wood carve, one of them taught him to fight, and then the last one...
The wood carver was also teaching him how to see while blind. That was the major... The wood carving was second.
The wood carver also had major pedophile vibes and gave Serapio beatings constantly.
I did not pick up on
that. Pedophile vibes?
Oh, no, he didn't literally. I just...
okay.
God, I was like, were we not reading the same book?
No. He was just very violent and very, very disgusting towards Serapio.
I was like, the voice actor really dropped the ball on that.
See, I thought the second lady was way more violent.
He also can talk to crows, and he can see through crows' eyes, and he gains more ability each time. Again, I don't remember what the third tutor teaches him, but
magic, the shadow magic.
Oh, okay, yes. It's also worth pointing out at this point, this book does a lot of representation. Two of the characters are non-binary. One of them is trans.
I enjoyed it.
Side note, real quick, Jesse had said, I have to be honest, I feel like I didn't have to have Serapio's how he knows stuff explained. Like, I personally would have been okay not seeing more of his childhood.
I actually kind of would have preferred if he only had flashbacks. I actually would have been okay if there were no viewpoint chapters of him in the current timeline.
Oh my god, that would have been so good.
And it was only through Shiala that we got his dialogue and interactions, and the only point of views we got from him were like for every third of the book. So it would have been 4 things with him. When his mother blinded him, the first tutor, the second one, and then the third, and then the last chapter when he is Crow God.
I fucks with it.
The other thing is, I think that would have been a way of making the books feel... Okay, guys, guess what?
Shot time?
Take a shot. One of the things I really like about A Song of Ice and Fire, and the way it does magic, is that it feels very, like, strange and horrific, and you're not quite sure. There's a plausible deniability to a lot of it, and a lot of that is done by, in the early books, the magic users are not viewpoint characters. And everybody else is like, did I see that right? Did I not see that right? I feel like that could have been a really cool thing with Ciela and his character, is that she doesn't quite know how much of a burgeoning god he actually is, and his magic is weird and strange. To achieve that effect, the author would have had to take away some of her magic, but to be honest, I found Giala's magic to be really boring, so that would not have been a great loss to me. But yeah, in general, I feel like that just was even just ignoring that whole magic part, I feel like it would have just been much more interesting, especially because his viewpoint does not feel very alien or burgeoning god. Katie, take another shot. One of the things that A Song of Ice and Fire does really great with Bran's storyline, who is the three-eyed raven, Crow Raven, is in the last book, in A Dance with Dragons, he is literally becoming a god. He is losing his humanity, and it's in his viewpoint, and you get this wonderful sense of the horror of losing your individuality. At one point, he talks about how, like, he just wanted to be a knight. He didn't want to be a tree, and that's what he's going to end up turning into. His tutor is a guy with roots growing through him, and he's 100 years old, and his skin is like paper. And he's like, you need to expand your mind. Think not in days, but in years, and you can go into the past and the future. And like that whole, there's a term for it that I'm blanking on, a literary term, but it's so cool to read. Serapio never felt like that to me.
For me, I'm okay with that because he was still not God yet. Like, he was just the vessel that would eventually become a god. And there is a moment at the very end of the book where you get the point of view of the Crow God, and it is very staccato and different to the way Serapio's normal narration is. Now, my argument will be, if in the second book, Serapio's narration is exactly the same and feels the same as it did in this, I will absolutely concede and agree with you that it's a fumble. But for me, because he's still human waiting to become a god, and right now you could just, like, he has sorcerer powers. So it felt more like sorcery than he is a god at this point. But at the end of the book, when he says, I am the Odo Sedo, like, then he is God now. And so I forgive it for that.
I feel like get to the good part fast.
Side note, he did come across, oh no.
Too many Song of Ice and Fire references?
No. Oh no. He did come across very K-drama-y. Did he not?
I mean,
that was not the vibe I got, but I can see what you mean.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I was in a very different headspace when I read this, so I did not think of Ciala as Gwendolyn Grimm. I did not make K-drama like.
Another thing I'll criticize is that I just didn't feel like he was the raw scar tissue that he should be internally. Like, towards the end of the book, they start being like, this is why he wants to go to this place and do this thing that's going to cost his life. And it's like, it just never felt like it was very well motivated.
Jesse just said, goodness, I felt such immense relief in the end once he actually said his name. And because I was waiting for that, like, the whole time. I was hoping he'd turn into a crow. Like, I There was that moment where,
oh my god, that would have been so great, because that would have been so alien.
And there was literally a part earlier when he says Odo Sedo, and he's like, he felt wings trying to break out of him, and I was like,
Black Swan.
Is he gonna be a giant is he gonna be the biggest giant fucking crow? Or like half man, half crow?
Instead he's still just a human annihilation machine, which is very K-drama.
With him having a crow head and wings, but then, and like feathers coming down, and then the rest of him being human.
But then a mutated, disgusting, scary Karasu body?
I would have just said
absolutely.
A normal, like, skinny man body.
I like me some monster.
You know what I find interesting? Almost nothing really happens in the plot. Like, in terms of, like, we actually don't really need to cover a lot of the events that happen. We can almost just summarize, because, like, notice we're not even really...
That's the whole plot right there.
So, okay, really quick.
Narapa gets betrayed a lot. Ciala and Serapio get closer.
So this is the rest of the plot in a nutshell. There's another point of view main character. His name is Okoa. His mother was the matron of the...
Hey, Shelby. What's up?
Shelby!
Hello.
Welcome. Anyway, Okoa's mother was the matriarch of the Carrion Crow clan. She got murdered. She told him, she sent him a message that she was murdered. And then, nothing else really happens with him.
He has a really cool sister, and their relationship is written in this cool way where, like, they're both, like, siblings, but they're also leaders of the people now, but they still kind of snipe at each other, and you're like, they meet and they butt heads, and you're immediately like, okay, how are they going to work this out? What's going to happen? What's the personal tension? She's in one chapter! One chapter!
How is he going to solve the murder of his mother? I don't know. It doesn't fucking get solved! Because you have, like, 3 chapters with Okoa about a third of the way through the book, and then you don't hear from him at all! And his plot is basically, at the end, he picks up Serapio off a rock after he kills a bunch of people. Shala and Serapio's plot, they start doing the romancings. Eventually, Storm comes. She rescues a guy by diving into the ocean who fell overboard. She comes up. He ends up dying anyway. She's a mermaid now. And her crew is like, even though before they were like, Teak, yeah, you sing to the waters. Her ship mutinies her. They try to kill her. Serapio's like, not today. That's my new girlfriend that I can't touch because I gotta be a virgin god for some reason.
Cute K-drama moment where his CGI Karasus go around him and they pluck out the lips of one dude and the eyes of another and the skull of another.
His crows, he was like, they were going to kill you, Shala, and I couldn't have them do that. His crows just killed the entire fucking crew. And then she wakes up and she's like, did that actually happen? And he was like, yes, it was not my intention to kill the crew, but things happened. Between her singing and the wind flapping from crow wings, they made it to shore. They get to shore.
At this point, they're very, like, lovey-dovey with each other.
Shala tried to kiss him, and he was like, no, I cannot. And so she's kind of like,
That's actually a perfect description, yeah.
This is kind of where I agree with Katie, which is that she started off the book being, I felt like, okay, this is a bad bitch. She's cool, she's tough. And I did not like that because I thought that I hate sassy characters. But then after a little bit, I was like, okay, no, the author realizes she's tough, but also, like, she has weaknesses as a person. And then at this point, I started disliking her character again because, like, now she's just mopey girlfriend. She says snappy, like, things, and she's sassy, but, like, she really is, she's the hot girl who says sassy things and follows around Sephiroth. Like, that's really, like, who she is. She doesn't, and we're going to talk about this because this will get worse when we get to the end.
I really felt like Shala was done dirty in this last third because she's just, like, she begins to realize, oh, hey, he is a crow god, and he's walking to his death, and I don't like that. And she's like, there's a part where it talks about her, like, crying, begging, yelling at him, like, don't do this. And I'm like, Shala, how did you get to this? Like, my bad bitch. Like, what's happening? So Shala's done dirty, and basically her story ends where, like, there's 2, like, nice romantic scenes that I actually liked between them. One is on the ship where she's, like, drawing in his hand. He gets turned on for the first time in his life. And it is great because he's like, oh shit. And she's like, I saw that. And it's great because it's like, she's just touching his hand. And I was like, again, I'm on a plane at this point, and I'm like, know.
But that was a really good.
It was
One
great.
thing the author does really well is the slow burn towards the romance. Now, because there's so much other stuff going on in the novel, it's kind of hard to pinpoint that romance. And there's also glaringly, obviously awful saccharine stuff that happens because there's so much else going on. So I guess to make it stand out even more. But there are so many good little bread pieces.
Anyway, the other moment that I liked was, like, obviously he has rebuffed her sexual advances, but then on his last day before he decides he's gonna turn into a crow god and potentially die, he's like, I'd like to spend my last day with you, Shala, if you're willing to spend it with me. And she's like, I'll do it. And they, like, go to, like, shops and they do stuff. And then at the end of the day, he's like, I'd like to give you a gift. I got a room at this inn. And she's like, a room at this inn? What could possibly be happening? Oh, and she was eating, like, a corn cake or something that had honey on it. And he just, like, licks the honey off of her fingers. I actually thought it was kind of gross. Like it was her whole hand. It wasn't just her one finger.
Was it really her whole hand?
It was all of her fingers, and then he, like, kisses her palm, and I'm like,
it wasn't cool. It was too much.
One finger, like, just like,
yeah, that's what I had envisioned, but I didn't.
It was multiple.
Just imagine
fingers.
him sticking the entire thing like cartoon style.
No. Part of me wishes he didn't say anything at the end of the bath scene and just gave her a look after, making it clear that things were done before leaving. I agree. So basically after he cleans the honey off of her hand with his tongue, they go to a bath, and I'm narrating this the way I normally do, but guys, I was here for this romance. Do not let me making fun of it let you think
mislead you.
I was shameless fangirl in the stands, like, rah rah. Anyway, so they go to this bath, and he was like, I shall bathe you, and he, like, washes her and then does a little downstairs fondling, and then at the end because he says, like, I'm gonna give a gift for you, and at the end of it, and this is the part Jesse was saying, was at the end of it he says, actually you gave me a gift, and then he walks off. And I agree with Jesse, I would have preferred if he hadn't said that and just been like, they shared eye contact, and then he walked away.
If they had a longer scene there and there was a longer build up and that happened, 100% agree. But as it was and how perfunctory it was.
You stole mine.
Shelby likes your hair.
Oh, thanks.
Did you guys also see her 80s sitcom shirt?
Bow, 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 bow.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I did will the
That's exactly.
After that happens, Shala's like, I'm gonna go find that cute girl who was kind of into me. And then she was like, no, the convergence is happening. I have to go see him. And then she does it. And she gets pushed back into a crowd. And that's the end of Chiala's story in this book. That's it. That's done.
My girl got done so dirty. I was really irritated. The thing is that a lot of this book is let down by the ending, because the ending is when the most important part of the book, structurally speaking. A lot of these stories only function if the end works well. Because you can tell, because we skipped over a bunch of scenes, because a lot of this book is more of the character work that's being done.
Which I like. I like the character work.
But the thing about character work is it has to have a strong decision at the end. And Ciela has no decision at the end of the book.
There's nothing. She does nothing. She makes no significant... my girl was done so bad.
She literally faded into the background, full hardcore, while Serapio had his more badass K-drama scene.
Shelby says Ciela gets done even more dirty in the sequel.
Great.
Ciela is one of the coolest characters.
Shelby, write what you think of the sequel, because I read a blurb about it, and there was something about Narampa, and I'm going to make an argument about it, but if you could just give us your thoughts and we'll talk about it.
Okay, and so basically the problem is, as I was saying, is that all four of the narrative characters we get, Okoa, Ciela, Serapio, and Narampa, they are basically, there's not a lot of plot. It's a character arc that needs to be anchored by a decision at the end that makes forward motion. Okoa does not make a decision like this. His whole story, and me and Maria have talked about this, and we'll talk about it more in a minute, could have been much more interesting in terms of the choices he has to make for his society and the belief in his crow god.
100%.
Narampa does not even make a choice. She just keeps losing to an 18-year-old who's hot and bitchy. And then jumps off a cliff, and the book ends with her dead, but gonna be brought to life in a minute by a witch. That's how the story ends.
Yeah, so Narampa's story, to kind of pick up where we left off last, she's battling Ava, they're doing machinations, and basically someone attempts to assassinate her a couple of times, and it very obviously looks like somebody is trying to frame Carrion Crow as the people, and one of the sun priests is like the priest of knives, and it's this non-binary character named Ikton, and Ikton is like, it looks like Carrion Crow, but the Heihan was too, there's the word, haha, I got it. The Heihan was too fresh. Normally it's done in like their early teens, and like this guy's was like brand flippin' new. She's like, it was probably Carrion Crow. And then like she meets Okoa, and him and her have a bonding moment, and I was like, oh, this is going to be Okoa's purpose. Him and Narampa are going to join forces and help bring about reform and have to challenge people.
No.
Nope, that doesn't go anywhere. Someone makes it look like Okoa was trying to assassinate her by, like, as he reaches to give her, like, a arm grab, one of these guys, somebody knocks into him, so his arm flies out, and Ikton immediately is like, ha-cha! Protection! Okoa is framed for trying to assassinate Narampa. Narampa's like, nah, that's not what happened. And Ikton is like, no, that's definitely what happened. Even though I was questioning whether Carrion Crow were the assassinators, I now 100% believe that they were the assassinators, even though you, the person who was attempting to be assassinated, said that's not what happened. Somebody pushed him. I'm going to ignore all of that and suddenly decide that we need to retaliate against Carrion Crow. And basically what happens is everyone wants to retaliate against Carrion Crow. Narampa's like, nah, that's dumb. We don't want another Knight of Knives. What are we doing? And so they're like, Ava's like, well, I wanted her gone anyway. And Ikton's like, you'll never agree, and to do this, we need to agree. So they basically vote her off the island. They decide to have that other guy replace her as Sun Priest, and she's just gonna, like, fade into the shadows. And
That's how I viewed it, too. She's literally, like, so inconsequential the entire time she is there at the summit. She's completely useless and, like, just fucked into a corner. There is not a single moment where she displays some of that like, yutzpah. You know, like, no, none of that.
Nothing. Anyway, and then, like, she's like, man, I've been voted off the island. This sucks. And then Ava comes and is like, we're going to kill you now because I can't have you complicating things. In between Ava coming to assassinate her, she's like, I need to do something. I'm going to climb down this mountain, go to the maw, and find my brother, who is one of the street lords of Coyote's Maw. And I actually really liked this scene where she finds her brother, because they had, like, he was 6 years old the last time they saw each other, and his life has been very hard, and she became Sun Priest. So it's like they're on two,
just like another K-drama character where he's in the pleasure business and he's in the gambling business and the, black, like, there's just a whole bunch of seedy, red district-y stuff.
Here's the thing. It's a good scene, and it is an example of her doing a thing. The problem is that it is not a culmination of her character growth up to that point. It is not as though she has been resisting using the connections from her old life to do this new thing. It's not as though she has been actively fighting past her past.
Because she's basically like, my family's dead to me. Like, the whole time, her family is dead. She has no complicated feelings about it. Besides kind of shame, she doesn't want people to know she's from Coyote's Maw. And then so when she's like, I must go to my brother now, I was like...
And then it doesn't go anywhere. That's the other weird bit, is because after this, her character just falls off a cliff, literally. There's no meaning to
also
her
dies.
And her brother getting back.
She does die.
Her brother basically is like, I shall ask my witch to read your future and see what's happening. And the witch is like, oh, a storm is coming. It's going to be real bad.
Not unlike the Red Lady in Game of Thrones.
No, it is not. Oh my, this is a misuse of alcohol and literature.
Anyway, he's like, witch lady, give her a talisman of protection, and she basically gives her this thing and is like, listen, if you're ever in trouble, say my name and I will be able to come find you. And Narampa forgets that until the absolute lastest moment. So she has that conversation with her brother. Again, great scene, really enjoyed it. She scurries back to the tower, goes in, gets back to the tower. Ava's like, okay, must kill you now to not complicate things, and tries to take her, and their goal is to take her and throw her body into Carrion Crow District to complete the cycle. And so there's this idea that there's all these things happening like who killed Yalitza, the matron of the Carrion Crow clan? Like, who did it? In the end, nah, it was just Ava fucking around, causing shit. Like, that's it.
Also, Ava dies at the end of the book, so it's not like this is gonna be an interesting, like, mastermind that we can have, because that's the next thing that happens, is that Serapio goes to confront the Sun Priests. He, like, opens his eyes. Okay, here's the thing. He does make a decision at the end of the book that is a growth from his character arc throughout. That being said, I felt like it was a really weak moment in that it was, God help me, perfunctory.
Oh no, Jesse.
It felt very perfunctory. It literally, like, the author knew, hey, this needs to be a big character revelation moment. I haven't really done the work to put in a thematic way for this to come to fruition or a final thing to push him over the edge. So I'm just gonna, you know what? I'm just gonna have him think about it. You know what it's like? And this may put me and Maria, this may cause us to fight a little, but pistolas. You remember in the Battle of the Five Armies, how, like, the way that it's not Theoden. Who's the guy?
Thorin. Thorin
I was close.
Oakenshield.
Right. The way he was like, okay, the way I'm going to overcome the Arkenstone is just by grabbing my head, hearing a bunch of voices going like this for 30 seconds, and then now it's boom. I'm back to normal Thorin. Yeah. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like we didn't actually do a lot of the work to get him to the point where, because Serapio has these thoughts of like, oh, what could my life be as me instead of as a vessel for a god?
No, he only has that thought once. I realized, because I was thinking about this after we spoke about it earlier today. Well, the person who actually imagined Serapio's life, if he wasn't a god, was Shiala after the bath scene. And then at the very end of the book, he was like, in the past few days after meeting Shiala, he began to question his purpose and his journey and what would have happened if he was just Serapio. And I was like, you should have built that up more. It should have been something we spoke about, like, the whole flipping time.
That relationship was made shallow by the inexploration.
Was it made shallow? Guys, you have no idea how much I love puns. I have to cut out like half of the ones I make because they're stupid.
Because they're
I'm
terrible.
standing by that one. I stand by that one. His motivations for wanting to become the Crow God are never actually laid out specifically very well. At the end, Shiala says like, oh, now I understand why he wants this. It's because he wants to go home and belong. And you're like, what? He has never expressed that in his viewpoint that we have been in a lot. One of the other reasons it would have been good if we hadn't been in his viewpoint.
Yeah, no. I got so confused as to far as why his loyalty. Why loyalty? Why is that happening towards the rest of the clan? It, like, yeah, maybe brainwash. Yes, absolutely 100%, but that is not shown whatsoever.
So Shelby just said, but wouldn't you run into the Iron Widow problem that it doesn't make sense for a character to not follow the belief? I think the issue is that he is not raised in those beliefs. He is raised as an Obregi.
So to hang on to these beliefs, there has to be some motivating reason, like loneliness or my mother did love me.
The love of his mother? Is it maybe because he idolized his mother?
That's what I got. That his mother placed this upon him as a child, and I would have liked this to be a little bit more explicit. And that's the thing. All of this stuff is implicit. So you know he loves his mother. It's
only inferred.
Yeah, and his and I guess that's fine. I would have preferred for it to be a bit more explicit.
No. It needs to be explicit, otherwise it's not really there. There's a lot of inferences made.
So, he loves his mother and wants to make her proud, is an inference that is there. He has gone through major trauma, and the only thing that validates it is if he becomes a fucking crow god at the end of it.
And that's what's a really good piece, is that each person puts into his mind that he is something beyond himself. So I bought into that. That's fine.
For me, it worked fine as a reader, but I do agree that it would have worked better to have his motivations for why explicitly stated, besides the I am the vessel for the crow god, thus I must be the vessel for the crow god.
And also explored throughout the book and challenged. So I thought it would be interesting if it was one of these things where like he felt when he got onto the ship that like this is the only thing that validates his pain. This is the only way he can love his mother. There's nothing else for him. And then he meets Shiala, who also feels sort of like a monster and an outsider. And then he could realize, like, no, there is another place for me that I never thought of. And then his decision to become the Crow God at the end has more weight because he actually was tempted towards something else. So the thing about it is that it's fine to have the foundations laid, but if you don't actually connect those to the character, it's just inferred. And then what those choices that the character make are not as powerful. I didn't feel it emotionally. It's not like he feels a certain amount of like glee or power coursing through him when he's able to do these crow god powers, and that would have also been a reason for him to want to be a crow god. A lot of these characters, I'm realizing, just feel very motivationless. They just kind of feel like they're doing a thing, and there doesn't feel like there's a strong reason for them to be doing a lot of these things.
I think for me, his arc would have either she needed to, because the problem is she has the line right at the end where he was ready to make this choice his whole life, but in the past few days he had kind of questioned it a little bit, but now he's ready to make it again. And the thing is, if you're gonna have him question it, we need to see him question it. We need to see him grapple with this decision, and then at the end finally make it, because for him to decide in the chapter where he makes the decision that he had been questioning the decision doesn't work. So either he needed to be fully committed the whole time, which, less interesting, or he needed to actually grapple with the decision, like Will said, a bit more. And I think, again, as a reader, I enjoyed this book. I didn't think it was not enjoyable, but it could have been better, and that was a moment that could have been better. So that's Serapio's plotline. So again, Okoa's ends where Serapio. Actually no. So again, Narampa fell off a thing. Like, she jumped off a bridge to get away from Ava and the things. The witch lady finds her, blood rituals her, and is like, maybe she'll be resurrected. I hope this works. And that's where Narampa's story ends. And then in the book blurb for book 2, it says she is now the reincarnation of the sun god. That's how this book should have ended. Don't save that for the next book. That is the conclusion of her arc in this book. Narampa has an arc. Now I
feel like this author was done dirty. You
know what? I'm tempted to think that, but I'm also think that she could have just cut all of Okoa's chapters if she needed space. Like, the thing is, there's a lot of stuff she could have, if she needed space, if it was a page count problem, and that's why she had to end things early, I don't really think so. There's plenty of other stuff that could have been cut. I know, Jesse. She's reacting to what you said.
And again, this can't be considered a spoiler. It's on the book blurb. When you go to Goodreads and it shows you on the back of the book, it says, now Serapio and Narampa are personifications of gods. And I'm like, so that should have been the end of this book, because it ends really weird where Okoa goes to get Serapio after he's killed everyone, and he's maybe alive, maybe dead, we don't know, and he takes him, and they're flying on Benunda's back. Benunda's Okoa's giant crowbird, and she's taking him to the Eyrie, and he was like, we're going home, brother. That's how the book ends. Meanwhile, a much better ending would have been, because again, you had the scene where the witch was like, I don't know, maybe this will bring Narampa back, maybe, and so a much better ending would have been her coming back, feeling the presence of the sun god, and being like, holy shit, I'm a reincarnation of the sun god now. And then that's where you, boom, end the book, because at least it would have completed her storyline.
I think the thing is, even Serapio killing all of those...
Thank you, Shelby! Is that not a giant fucking spoiler? Shelby said, that's a big spoiler, stupid book blurbs.
Even him slaughtering the priests, it's a cool scene and all, but what we cared about was the impact of it, not necessarily the scene itself, and we don't really understand what the impact of it is. Like, how is this? We needed 2 more chapters to show, there's a whole thing about falling action after the climax, and that was the climax, and there's no falling action. Also, Okoa has no reaction to seeing the embodiment of his god having just killed a whole bunch of sun priests. He's just like, oh, that's crazy, dude. Let me fly you back to my house now.
Just to give a little bit of detail about when he kills the priests. So they're coming down to do a ritual. He just kills them all. Dead. But there's this point where he goes to kill the actual sun priest, and the book also makes you think that he kills Iktan. And Iktan is that non-binary character that I mentioned earlier who has romanticals with Narampa.
Is he not dead?
You missed it. Don't worry, Will missed it as well.
No.
Are you fucking serious?
No, I didn't.
Yes, he did.
No, I didn't.
He's a romance interest.
Not he.
Or Jay.
Ton and Narampa used to be lovers. They have romantical notions. Things get a little heated. But again, Iktan supports removing her as sun priest. So, fuck you, Iktan. Shelby did say that Iktan becomes her favorite character at the end of in book 2. So maybe Iktan is redeemed. But Iktan throughout the book does this thing where Narampa thinks it's Ikton, but Ikton has disguised her sure self somewhere else, and it's someone posing as them. And you get a scene where obviously Serapio kills everyone, and he guts the Priest of Knives, which is Ikton. And then at the end, Okoa is examining the bodies, and the Priest of Knives is a woman. And Okoa would be able to tell if it was a non-binary character, but specifically says it's a woman and a girl, and uses feminine pronouns.
That's a good point. Holy
Ikton's
shit!
alive, motherfuckers!
I literally at that moment was like, oh, okay, Okoa is not using they them pronouns because he doesn't know. It just looks, Ikton just looks female. Is that a cultural dance of your people you picked up in Greece? What was that?
No, that is not a good. That's my success tip. I'm the only one that picked it up. Both of my co-hosts missed it. That's my. Oh, Jesse. So me and Shelby got it. Jesse also was confused, and it is a really subtle detail. Because they're using she, and you're like, maybe Okoa just doesn't know that Shay is non-binary.
For the record, it's never really stated if non-binary people look a specific way separate. So, like, the author of Iron Widow is non-binary, but looks entirely female if you were just to look at their Instagram, for example. So that's what I had just assumed, was that Okoa wasn't in the know that this person was non-binary and just saw a woman.
So the other thing, and Shelby also picked up on this, is that the person in the red mask who is killed has long hair, and Ikton's hair is shaved. Either way, it's not Ikton. Ikton lives, baby. Wop, wop, wop.
I actually liked Ikton as a character. I thought they were really cool.
Serapio realizes, or the crow god realizes, that he didn't actually kill the sun priest, because when he reached into the sun priest's body, the essence of the sun priest was not there, and he was like, you are a fake.
Because Narampa had mentioned earlier that sun priests serve for life, and Ikton was like, whatever, we'll make an exception. So clearly that was not a legal rule, that was a religious rule that there are sun priests for life.
Right.
So I thought that was like, not clever, but I just thought that was interesting.
So these are the ending scenes for all the characters. Shiala is pushed into a crowd after trying to get to Serapio during, like, massacre time.
Such a terrible ending for her.
Narampa is dead, and someone is trying to resurrect her. Okoa grabs Serapio out of a pile of dead bodies and takes him to
his house.
No, it's not his house. It's the birds, the giant crow's house. He's never been here. Like, this is super sacred. Banunda's like, I'm protecting sun god baby, or crow god baby. But anyway, and that's the end of the book. That is literally it. Nothing. I immediately was like, I need the second book, because this had no, like, besides Serapio finally becoming.
It's what we talked about.
Crow god.
It's what we talked about in Kushiel too. Death of Boromir should go not at the beginning of the Two Towers, but at the ending of the Fellowship of the Ring. This is that exact problem. Whatever happens in the first 3 chapters there should happen in the last 3 chapters here. It's weird, because, like, the book as a whole, I relatively enjoyed it. Like, it's not my favorite book, really. I enjoyed parts of it. I thought it was pretty well written. And then we got to that ending, and, like, it's like the lintel of a house. It doesn't matter how strong all these stones are if the lintel isn't there. And that's sort of how I feel about this book, is that without a strong ending, a lot of the rest of the arch is just kind of collapses.
I still enjoyed the book, and I really liked the beginning and the middle. The ending was a bit of a fumble for me. Okoa was just not utilized. Again, he could have been trying to solve his mother's murder. Him and Narampa could have actually been creating a bond.
I thought he was going to fulfill the detective archetype, honestly.
It would have been, I would have loved to see my boy Okoa.
Oh, that's the other thing, is he should have just been, there's so much, like, should he join the Radicals? Should he not? What is his personal relationship with the Crow God?
And then it never really gives you his deliberation.
Again, he sees the embodiment of his god, and he's just like, cool story, bro.
He has a chance to train the cultists, but he never says yes. We never see him say yes or no, or what he does with it. He literally has a scene where he walks away, and he's like, I've met them, I can think about this and make a decision. And then the next thing we get, it's flippin' convergence, and what's-his-face has killed everyone.
I wanted to see more of his sister. I liked him and his sister's relationship. It seemed interesting.
There was so many good, the characters in this were so interesting, guys. And the character dynamics, the dialogue I enjoyed. You can't present Yalitza's murder, that's the matron of the Crow clan, as like this mystery to be solved and what's happening and what's this thing, and then have it be resolved as an offhand thing of Ava being like, oh, let's just throw her into carrying Crow. Like, you can't set it up as a plot point and then have it not be.
You also can't not have it be answered by the children who are emotionally affected by it. We have set up Okoa has stakes on what happened to his mother, and he still doesn't know.
And she literally sends him a thing saying, I've been murdered. And he's like, I must find out what happened to my mother. And then I enjoyed this book so much more until the end. And again, I still enjoy this book. I would reread it. I'm gonna read the second book. Shelby, I'm gonna scroll back to when Shelby. Sequel is great. I enjoyed the first book, and I loved the second. Granted, I finished it 2 days ago, so I'm still on a high. But the characters, Narampa in particular, get so much more. The world is bigger, and the setup for book 3 has me very excited. So, like, it sounds like things might be, like,
opening up.
And some of the things that I have issues with are come together. Shelby did say, agreed, the end of this book was a dead end. Or no, I think she was saying the Litza's murder and the whodunit was a dead end. Because it was. So it's just, like, a weird thing, because my experience of reading this book was really enjoyable. When, the scene where the crows were eating the crew members, I was literally on a plane. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I grab my seat like this, and the dude across from me is like, he jumps, and he's looking at me, and I'm like...
What I've seen is that the author previous to this had written some, like, more urban fantasy type fare, and honestly, I feel like that is probably her lane. Like, again, if this is just the adventures of Mayan by Lady Pirate Ziala, I feel like this becomes a much easier book and becomes a more effective. I mean, like, the plot is entirely different, but what I'm saying is that I feel like if she hadn't pushed so far with the whole godhood and politics stuff, the book would have worked better.
What if it had started off, the entire first novel was from Ziala's perspective, and the second novel was Narampa and then Serapio's perspective in that same time period, and then going up, and then the third novel was everything culminating
Katie,
together.
you didn't read The Savior's Sister, so you're not going to understand why what you just described is making me flash back to a time in my life that I would prefer never to touch again.
Never to think about.
I'm so sorry. Holy shit.
No, in that book, the one character had one book, the other character had the same book, and it was just super boring.
So Shelby's questions from before, her comment, she's here now, but I'm going to read it anyway. I love the world and history in these books. I feel so immersed in the cultures and customs of the characters, and I love how much it actually impacts the plot. It makes me excited to learn more as the series goes on. I agree, Shelby. I do not think she did a great job with the Sun Priest religion. Carrion Crow and even the Teeks felt very rich, but I don't understand what the Sun Priest religion is. Like, how does the sun god, because there is a sun god, that's who the Sun Priest is supposed to represent. I don't understand any of that. So that for me was weak.
I did, because, one of my complaints about Children of Blood and Bone was how surface level all of the cultural things were, and in this one I felt like the world building was a lot better. There was a real sense that there were different places and that the different places had different cultures, and we actually got to see a little bit of them. Again, like I said earlier, the Sun
Not Jacqueline
Priest...
Carey. Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, not Jacqueline Carey, but on top of that, the Sun Priest is like one weird spot that like is missing world building and detail for some reason.
Even though it's the main religion that's overhauling all.
And one of the main characters is the Pope
of the religion. Anyway, her question was: Black Sun gets a lot of praise for its pre-Columbian culture and setting. How did you feel about the world building? And I guess we're literally just talking about this in the novel. Did the book deserve all the praise it got, or do you think the books get automatically congratulated now if they don't have vaguely medieval European setting? I've seen a lot of argument on simply different, new, equal, better, and I'm curious on your thoughts.
I feel like, a lot of books do get accolades just for not having that. I feel like this book does it well. There's still an extent to which the culture is still a little bit not as weird as real pre-Columbian cultures. Like for my mother's Christmas gift, we went to an exhibit in a museum about Machu Picchu, which is the Incan culture, and it had a lot of stuff about their myths and stuff, and like their way of seeing the world is just so totally different than like it's really interesting from a world building perspective. So like there is such a uniqueness sometimes to these other cultures that I feel like this book, it doesn't need to go into that, but it could have, and it would have been a little bit better. Yeah, I think it would have been a little bit more interesting. But I think, I do think that the culture otherwise was pretty good.
For me, I had a similar thing with, like, in Iron Widow, I felt the world building was really kind of shallow. Like, it didn't feel super futuristic. It didn't feel as, like, ancient China as it like could have. It was in this weird in between space, and nothing felt like we were like, the technology, what is who gets to use it? And then Will had the same complaint about with Children of Blood and Bone, about how the world building felt superficial. And actually a lot of people commented on that video saying that they too also felt
I was really surprised, considering how bad we got hammered with Iron Widow, that like a lot of people shared the criticisms.
So I like experiencing fantasy. I had been looking for a fantasy book that was high fantasy set in pre-Columbian culture, because you don't see it. And Will and I have talked about how difficult it would be to write that, because to do like modern Latin America, you have to have colonialism. You cannot separate like current Latin America, or even Latin America 200 years ago, without colonialism.
Having a second world Hispanic culture as Hispanic is now is almost impossible to do,
unless you wanted to deal with
to replicate the whole two cultures
colonialism
thing. Yeah, so no, that's difficult. But yeah, you can rewind to
pre-Columbian.
The author had a lot of criticism for her previous book series. I looked it up today.
And some for this one as well.
I couldn't really find anything on this one very much. Basically, she says she's Native American, but she might not be as Native American as her mother thought she was. She's also Black, and that's like a big thing in Native America. Okay, so basically, Native American racial identity and just identity in general is super complex and complicated and a touchy subject. And so for her to write books about a tribe that she is not a part of is tricky, and some people have been okay with it and a lot of people haven't.
And some people were okay with it. Like there was one I read, one person, and I can't remember who it was, who gave a positive review about it, then found out that she wasn't officially part of the tribe that she associated with, and then redacted.
Her previous book series was about Navajo mythology and the Navajo tribe, who don't like that name, but I'm also not sure how to pronounce DIN accent mark E. So I'm just basically, they said that there are certain stories of theirs that are sacred that they don't like outsiders to talk about, and there's like some tribes will actually have like committees before you tell anyone outside the tribe specific stories, because they're very specific to them. And she had kind of stomped on some of those in her series. I'm not educated enough on it to have much of an opinion, because really tribal identity and culture is such a complex and personal thing. I will say that for South American indigenous peoples, it's really not as touchy a thing almost at all. Part of it is because a lot of those cultures are either dead or got subsumed into the greater Hispanic or mestizo cultural identity. Not to say that there's still a lot of indigenous people in Latin America, even some that we think of as dead, like the Maya. The Maya are still a very alive people. They speak Mayan. They don't speak Spanish. It's kind of interesting.
It is. I've seen that on one show in particular where one of the contestants spoke Mayan in particular. And I thought that was so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, but in general, they tend to be a lot chiller. So I haven't really seen a lot of criticism for this book from that. And also, this is a lot more second world. What's the word I'm looking for? She's taking cultural ideas and building new cultures out of them. She's not saying this is a specific.
She's creating inspiration.
It's like Lord of the Rings. You know, it's not England. It has influence from
right. It's been essentialized down to an extent, and obviously there can be difficulties with that in terms of Native culture being essentialized down by outside forces and being simplified. But again, the South American Indians tend to be they don't really care as much about this. So there's an extent to which this book, I think, just doesn't hit a lot of those problematic notes from what I understand. Basically, I looked for criticism of it and I couldn't find any. Whereas for her previous series, which deals with real Navajo myths and stories, there was a lot. So I don't really have much of an opinion, but that's from what I understand of what I read.
I think it's really interesting. I will read the second book. I don't know if you guys will.
I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens, but I don't expect it to be a good book. The ending to this really makes me think like, oh, okay, the next book is not going to be a very good cohesive whole, and I'm not necessarily interested enough in the specific plot lines.
I enjoyed this book. I did not love it as much as Gideon the Ninth. I can tell you that much, but it was pretty good.
If you really want some pre-Columbian South American high fantasy, this is not, you could do much worse than this. For those listening, don't forget this was our Patreon live stream. If you would like to sit in on our next live stream and decide which book we read, go to our Patreon. It will be linked in the description below. Do either of you guys have any thoughts, final thoughts for this book?
So Shelby did say, so without spoiling, there's one really cool thing you guys asked for that does happen in book 2.
Maybe he turns into a crow.
That would be cool. I'd like if he turned into a crow. That would be great. No, that's it. I like this book. Thanks for joining. Thanks for those of you who watched it later. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Jesse and Shelby, for showing up and talking about things and giving us your opinions.
All right. We will talk to you all later then.
Bye.